When the internet began, bulletin board services, or BBS, became the first online communities of the so-called information superhighway. Using their phone lines, people logged in from all over America to talk about sports, games, movies, and on one BBS in particular, share their ghost stories. Over time, those communities all went dark, except for one lone server that continues to operate somewhere in an unknown part of Pennsylvania's Rust Belt. A relic of the 1990s, veiled in mystery, it is a digital archive of humanity's strangest encounters with the unknown, as told by the people who experienced them. My name is Brandon Schexnayder, and you are listening to Fear Daily.
Subject, Emily. User, DBLTake22. Posted, March 27, 1998.
The interstate at night always felt like a confessional. Not the warm wooden kind with a lattice and a whispering priest, but a long concrete throat swallowing sound and light in equal measure, where your sins rode shotgun and stared at you in the glass. Sodium lamps fell away behind me in patient intervals, like molten halos receding, and the rest was just the thrum of tires and the soft, stubborn rattle from the glove box, and the thought I kept trying not to have. I was relieved to be alone. I dropped Emily at the hospital with the easy lie that I'd be back at dawn. She was home from college on spring break with 2 thin arms and a duffel that always seemed heavier than it should be, and she looked older than the girl I'd last hugged. Older in the way people get when they sit with sickness. Her smile careful, her words measured, her eyes fixed to some middle distance like a runner measuring the last quarter mile. She wanted to spend the night in the room with her mother, to hold her hand, to keep vigil the way good people know how. I made father sounds about food and rest and returning in the morning, and she didn't test the story. She let me go. You tell yourself hate is a clean thing, a blade you can sheathe or throw away once you're done, but in the years I was married, I learned it's closer to rust. Slow, invasive, a color you one day find in the seams of everything you own. We got good at the little wars, the skirmishes that happen in kitchens and bathrooms and hallways where every object becomes a prop, a weapon, a witness. We fought about money, about how to rinse a plate, about hours and drinks and friends whose names were supposed to burn. We held our daughter up between us like a mirror and then disliked the reflections we saw. Mine, distracted, hers, suspicious, and yet I didn't leave because if you stay long enough, your house becomes the geography of your dread. The familiar turns that convince you this misery is a kind of safety. I can say I hated my ex-wife because I did, but hate is not the sharpest word for what was left in me when I drove away from that hospital. It was softer and uglier than hate. A slack length of feeling like a belt forgotten in a closet. All of that rose and fell with the road as I headed south. The car humming, the speedometer needle trembling where it liked to live, and I thought of the first year we knew each other when she smoked menthols and laughed in a voice that took over a room and told stories that started 3 scenes back, so that by the time she arrived at her point, you just wanted to keep listening forever. I thought of our god-awful apartment with its thin carpet and the air conditioner that coughed like it was dying by inches, and the night she fell asleep with the television bright and I tilted her head and took the cigarette from her hand and stabbed it out and felt for a second like there might be a way to save us both if I could just learn to be the right kind of gentle. I thought of Emily at 6, drawing birds without beaks because her teacher had said something sharp about realism, and of me saying nothing, and of my father's old voice in my mouth, and of the kind of silence that stains a house the way nicotine does. A tone to the walls you stop seeing until a stranger points it out. The highway opened up around me. Long, flat stretches where the dark pressed close and the trees stitched a hem along the horizon. A semi ghosted by in the opposite lane and pulled a ribbon of wind through the car that smelled like diesel in winter and made the map on the passenger seat lift and slap and settle. I let the radio stay off. I grew up in the kind of place where men siphon their feelings through music until the words do their crying, and I didn't want the excuse. I wanted the noise in my head to run itself dry and show me what was underneath. It turned out there wasn't much under there but guilt. The feeling didn't have a good sentence to live inside. It wasn't, "she's dying and I wish we'd been better," though that was true, and it wasn't, "I should have been kinder," though that was true too. It was a smaller, meaner thing. A pin driven into an old board. I had wanted her gone for so long that now, with the wish granting itself in some slow, clinical way, I felt implicated. I had no theology to help me, but I understood petitions and bargains, and I knew how the mind builds little altars you don't remember praying at until the answer arrives wearing your face. The two white eyes appeared far ahead, at a distance that is hard to measure because the night plays with depth like a child with a coin. I thought at first they were cresting the hill in the opposite lane, an ordinary approach, and then the line they made corrected itself and became a line with me in it. They grew quickly. There's a second the body finds that the head can't. Your hand is already moving before any word like danger forms, and I yanked the wheel, felt the weight of the car go impossibly light, heard the long animal scream of rubber losing its argument with asphalt. The ditch collected me. Nose first, a submission more than a crash, an ugly bowing, and in the windshield, a clean white took shape and then took everything. Ceiling tiles are a kind of sky you learn by heart if you spend time in rooms like those. They have the exact blank that designers think is mercy. When I woke into that bright humming nothing, it took a second for my chest to remember the work, another for my jaw to find itself, and then I was aware of the plastic in the crook of my arm and the stick of the tape and the beeping that manufactured a rhythm where mine wasn't ready to supply one. The air smelled like lemon and bleach. Somewhere, two wheels rolled a cart into a farther hall. I turned my head like you turn a page, careful not to tear it, and saw her at the foot of the bed, and not the version of her I had left in the other building, the thin woman with the wintered eyes, but the one from the old years, when her hair held its own shine and her mouth stayed young for entire afternoons in a sweater the wrong color made her laugh at my frown. She stood with her hand on someone's shoulder, and then I saw the someone, and got caught on that sight like a shirt on a nail. Emily was smaller, pulled in at the corners, the ponytail that used to sag toward the end of a school day now tight and high on her head, the way it was when I packed her lunches with too much of one food because I didn't know what to do with balance. Her face held the kind of crying that comes in rooms where the air has already been too full of it. Eyes raw, nose chapped, the stubborn, unglamorous labor of grief. My ex-wife's fingers, the ones that used to drum the steering wheel in traffic like it owed her a song, rested on Emily's shoulder with a careful weight. They came in together, but they didn't come in for me. They came to the bed and to the space of air that begins at the rails, and my daughter leaned in the way she used to lean toward a project at the kitchen table, elbows planted, body migrating toward what she loved with no intervening argument from her mind. She reached for a hand, and I saw then, past my own fear, that there was another shape under the blanket. The beeping counted something I didn't understand and didn't like. The light in the room had that false forgiveness I resent, as if what's clean exists to make what's happening acceptable. My chest remembered a breath and then forgot it and then remembered again. My tongue felt heavy, my voice an old idea with no mechanics left to produce it. If you spend long enough with a person, you'll learn the grammar of their smallest looks, the punctuation marks they throw with their eyes, and when my ex-wife lifted her face and her gaze found mine, a little tremor broke the calm, and I recognized it with the old dismay. We had used that look as a kind of weapon, a way to end a paragraph with a period you didn't want to discuss. It flickered across her and was gone, and she set her attention back on Emily, whose hand held the unseen hand beyond the rail with the concentration of someone warming a bird. I tried to turn and couldn't. The plastic tugged. The sheet hissed a little under the small movement. The ceiling came closer and softened at the edges. If there were words in the room, they swam in that bright and never made it to shore. But the shape of them carried the cadence I'd known since Emily was small. The way she'd said goodnight when she half believed the dark could hear her and punish her for the brevity of her love. My ex-wife's mouth moved. She smoothed hair, then lay on a pillow I couldn't bring into focus. The hum of the lights found a pitch that felt like a finger in my ear and settled there. Some part of me wanted the old ugly thing. The fight, the door half shut, the words spoken too loud so that at least something would be clear again, even if the clarity was poison. But the room refused it, and whatever anger I had kept like a talisman in my pocket turned finally to sand. The beeping did its metronome work, absolutely impartial. The smell of the room made an incision in my memory, and the oldest fears came forward, not roaring, just patient. That I had taught my daughter to live around me instead of with me. That the last story she would tell about her parents would be the one where she learned to separate love into pieces you could carry alone. She bent lower, the sight narrowed, the color went from the edges of things inward. Somewhere a wheel on a cart squeaked once and then composed itself. I felt a pressure at the back of my teeth, like a word that had grown too big to say, and then understood I would not be saying it. Emily closed her eyes and put her mouth near the ear I could not see, and whatever she said was as private as a prayer. The light moved like a tide over everything, and then the tide went out.
Subject, The Rot. User, Bob Dundid. Posted, July 22nd, 1997.
Handel says to put a subject line, so here's mine. If you work with fence wire, wear gloves. If you don't, keep reading and decide for yourself whether you still want to ignore me. My name on here ain't my real one, but my story is. This happened last year, June of '96, in a little spot that's more soybean dust than town. We've got one four-way stop, a post office the size of a living room, and a gas station everyone just calls the store. There's a doctor who comes Thursdays, unless his Buick dies, and if you break something on a Friday night, you might as well tape it together with electrical and say a prayer. That's how it is out here. I don't reckon it's so different where you are. My best friend was named Danny. Real name Daniel Ray Kestrel, but nobody called him that unless he'd done something stupid. He worked at Clem's garage since high school and could rebuild a carburetor while drinking Mountain Dew and telling a dirty joke. He had a boxer mutt named Jolene who chewed through everything but never bit anyone, and a little square house his uncle left him. He smoked menthols, said they tasted like winter. I'm telling you these small things because it's the small things I remember most now. Green lighter always in his left pocket, the way he'd flick grease off his fingers with a quick little snap. The habit he had of humming the same four notes when he was thinking. Hum, 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 hum. There's a groove in my head where that tune still lives. The cut was nothing. That's what he told me. He'd gone out to help his cousin patch fence down by the old drainage ditch. Scrap barbed wire, old stuff, brown and brittle, the kind that looks more like a dirt snake than metal. He said he snagged his forearm on a loose loop and it tore a line from wrist to elbow. Not deep, just ugly. He washed it at the spigot, poured a little gas over it, don't laugh, that's what folks do, and wrapped it with a bandana. Then he finished the fence, drank 2 beers, and called it a day. I saw it the next morning when I swung by the garage. He had the bandana off and was trying to clean it with a shop rag, jaw clenched like he was trying not to show it hurt. It looked, not right. The edges were angry, not red exactly, but a sort of gray red, like pork skin left too long in the sun. There was this fine dust on it too, like talc, except it stuck when I blew and it didn't float. I said, "Man, you ought to let Doc Tate look at that Thursday." He said he didn't need no traveling veterinarian to take his money for a tetanus shot and a sticker, and then he laughed and told me to grab a half-inch socket. By Sunday, it stank. It's a particular smell. If you know, you know. Not just sweat, not just infection. It's the smell of something that used to be part of you and isn't anymore. Like the smell under wet hay bales when you turn them and the bottom's black. I walked up on his porch and I knew. He had his arm out on the kitchen table under a lamp with no shade, and he was digging at the cut with a pair of tweezers like he was trying to pull something out of it. "What's in there?" I asked. He said, "It ain't splinters." I kept thinking splinters. Then he lifted the tweezers and something thin came with them. A thread, maybe, except it wasn't a thread and it didn't break right. It stretched like it was part of him. I told him to stop. He said it itches on the inside. He said it real quiet, like a kid admitting he stole candy. feels like when your foot falls asleep, except it spreads. I can feel it in my fingers, then my palm, then here." He touched his wrist and winced. "It moves," he said. I got mad because the word scared me, and I didn't want to show it. I said, "There's a doc on Thursday, damn it," and he just replied, "I'll go, okay?" and wrapped it back up. He did not go. Work got busy that week. Planting was late, belts on the conveyor busted, Clem's was stacked with busted mowers and trucks eating oil like candy. I didn't make it by Danny's until Wednesday night. Jolene barked polite at me once and went back to the couch. The TV was on, but the sound was off. The house smelled like that smell had been cooked, sweet almost, thick. He'd stopped wrapping the arm. It was swollen and shiny, the color of eggplant. The edges weren't edges anymore. They were lace. Little holes like moths had chewed them, only when you looked close, it wasn't holes at all. It was skin gone soft as soaked bread. His fingers were puffed and stiff. He held them out, palm up, apologizing without words. "I can feel it in my shoulder," he said. "In the bone?" I asked, like a fool. "In the places bones rub," he told me. He tried to laugh. He said, "You ever see those barns where they used to pack it with straw and it rots from the inside? It's like that. I can feel places with air in them." He tapped his arm, and it didn't make a sound I recognized. I told him we were going to the ER in Millerville, 25 miles and uninsured be damned. He nodded like he meant to stand up, and then the corner of his mouth twitched and he said, "Hold on," and he put his other hand to the cut. He pressed around it, gentle, like a man testing bread. He said, "It's softer under here now." His voice went smaller, the way a voice goes when a man is measuring himself against something bigger and finding out the numbers aren't friendly. We didn't go to Millerville that night. Thunder started up, and I worried about the roads and Jolene whining and him saying maybe morning. I shouldn't have listened. I left him a jug of bleach and said, "If it's in the dirt, maybe wash the house too." We both laughed at that, and it felt good for about 2 seconds, and then I went home and didn't sleep. Thursday afternoon, the Buick did die. Or at least that's what folks said about the doctor. I don't know. All I know is I called Danny and he didn't pick up, and I called again and Jolene barked, and that was it. I drove over at dusk. Flies know before anybody. They were already gathered at the window pane, a little storm of bodies bumping glass. The curtains moved with them like breath. I knocked, I yelled his name, I went in. The TV was still on, the fan was going. Jolene stood in the hallway with her ears flat, wanting to go in the bedroom and not wanting to, both at once. There was a trail on the floor, not wet, not dry, something like the track a slug leaves if a slug ate river clay. It went from the couch to the bedroom, and I followed it, calling his name and telling myself a man can be disgusting and still need help. He was sitting on the edge of the bed. That part is important. He had managed that much. The arm lay across his lap like it belonged to a different body. The skin had gone loose, not everywhere, but in strips. I could see beneath it the pale layer that looked like wax paper, and beneath that, the red that wasn't red anymore but brown, the color of tea. But all that, if it was only that, we could have gotten him in the truck. Called ahead, begged. That's not why I stopped. I stopped because the skin moved. Not like a heartbeat, not like a twitch. It moved the way wet leaves move when you stir them, and there's something down in the damp trying to get away from the light. It shivered and settled. The edges tried to climb back together and couldn't find the seam. He said my name real soft, and then he said, "Don't touch it." I lowered my hands and asked, "What is it?" He said, "I didn't clean the cut right away. Do you know that ditch, the one with the cattails? It floods with the field runoff. There's minnows in it sometimes, tadpoles." His mouth tried to smile and didn't finish. "There's silt down there that's older than this town, older than people, I figure." He swallowed. It found a place to live. I didn't say nothing. There wasn't a good thing to say. He looked past me then, eyes sliding sideways like he was looking at something that hadn't come inside yet. He said, "It ain't all bad. The itching's gone." He reached for the pack of menthols, and his good hand, if you can call it that, shook like a loose belt as he lit one. He took a drag and held it, then coughed, and something under the skin made a sound like wet paper. He closed his eyes and said, "I'd like you to take Jolene." I told him, "Hell no, you're not gonna." "Please," he said. He opened his eyes. They were milky around the edges, like they'd taken in ocean water. "It's moving up. I can feel it in my jaw." "Okay," I said, and took Jolene's collar and tied her to the kitchen table so she wouldn't follow me back. I came to the door, and he was looking at his arm like it was a map. He glanced at me, and something like relief crossed his face. I don't want to turn into something that makes people talk," he said. "You know how folks are." He smiled for real then, the short, tired smile he used when Clem told him to do 4 jobs with 2 hands. I won't say what I did next. Maybe I didn't. Maybe there was a storm that night and lightning found that little square house with the TV still on and the fan turning slow. Maybe the old wiring finally got mean. Maybe the ditch swelled and the water crept in and reclaimed what it reckoned was borrowed. Jolene slept in my truck and shook like thunder was inside her. The fire, if there was one, burned quick. There wasn't much to the place that couldn't go to smoke. Folks stood around the next morning and said it was a shame. The insurance man asked questions, and I told the truth I could live with. I hadn't seen Danny since Wednesday. He didn't suffer long, and that's the truth I hold. I don't know if it's the kind of truth they print, but it's mine. 2 weeks later, the county sent a man with a backhoe to scrape the lot clean. He dug down to try and find the old septic. When he dumped a scoop of earth by the ditch, something glistened in the dirt like the inside of a peeled grape. He turned the bucket quick and pretended he didn't see. The ditch took it like it was owed. I've thought about a million ways to write a fancy ending here. Some lesson or warning that wraps things up real neat. There ain't one. People get hurt in small ways, and sometimes the small ways yawn open and swallow a whole life. We tell ourselves there's control to be had. We pour gas on cuts because our granddaddies did, and we don't die until one of us does. I only know this. When I close my eyes at night, I don't see the fire. I hear that little hum, 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 and I smell wet hay turned black.
Fear Daily is an independent podcast hosted by Brandon Schexnayder and written by Brennan Storr, with Joanna Smith serving as the consulting editor, audio production by Rachel Boyd, and sound design by Southern Gothic Media. This podcast is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, and incidents are either products of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or to real events or locations, is entirely coincidental. Ad-free versions of Fear Daily are available now on your favorite podcast apps. For more information, visit feardaily.com. But move fast, before the server goes offline.